You describe in The Fisherman's Son a scene where some insurance company thugs go and beat a fisherman up because he was planning to testify.
Correct. And
that really happened.
That everything happened. They knew, the insurance company understood that if the blacklist was broken, if other fishermen came forward, then it would destroy the blacklist. He was jumped by two thugs and beaten almost to death. The message was clear. It was right before the trial, right before when he was going to testify. But there were witnesses. There were witnesses to the assault.
There was a time in the fishing industry when getting hurt didn't just end your season, but it could end your career. Not because you couldn't get back to work physically, but because your name, as someone who brought a claim for your injuries, circulated amongst boat owners and insurance companies and ensured that you'd never have a job again. This isn't a story about fishing. This is a story about power, fear, intimidation, and retaliation for using the very laws written to protect people who are doing the most dangerous job on the planet. I'm Joe Orlando Jr., and this is Behind the Bar. By the end of this episode, you're going to understand how an entire workforce was silenced, not by legislation, without one single written rule. I'm here with Joe Orlando Sr. Yes, he's my dad, the older, not quite as attractive version of Joe Orlando, as I'm so fond of saying. My father is a 45-year veteran trial attorney. He's a proctor in admiralty, heralded by the New York Times during his career, feared by insurance companies all over the world for his successes at trial. He's handled hundreds, if not thousands, of maritime cases through trial in the federal courts in Maine, Boston, New York. Where else, Dad? Anywhere else?
Florida. Almost every part of the nation that has ocean or Great Lakes attached, we've had claims.
Otherwise known as the navigable waters.
Correct.
And you also wrote 3 legal thrillers. Also, at least 2 of them based, actually all 3 of them based on trials that you actually tried.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first one, you have it with you, right?
I do.
And what's that called?
It's called The Fisherman's Son. And it is the story of a young immigrant fisherman who came to America with no skills other than fishing, with no education, and with an inability to speak English, but was willing and able to work very hard and made himself an invaluable member of a fishing crew until he was injured.
And this is a common story here in Gloucester, Mass., right?
Not only in Gloucester, Mass., but really the New England fisheries for at least 30 years. The Blacklist, which we'll talk about, destroyed lives, families, communities, all because insurance companies wanted to cheat, to use these kind of methods to prevent claims. And they even, and a blacklist finished you in the industry. Once your name got on the list, no boat could carry you, and if they did carry you, they wouldn't be insured. And if without insurance, they couldn't fish because the banks that held the mortgages in the boats wouldn't allow them to fish without insurance. So therefore, these men, these hard-working people who work in an industry that is incredibly dangerous, but incredibly important to the nation, were thoroughly controlled until the blacklist was broken.
All right, so, Dad, the fisherman that you were talking about, that you wrote the novel about, okay? Yes. It's a case you really tried.
Yes, the Fisherman's Son is a novel, but it is based on a trial that I actually had, a client that I represented. I changed the name to protect the guilty, but the fact of the matter is that, it was very much indicative of what was happening in the Gloucester waterfront, New England waterfront, East Coast waterfront.
So what happened to that main character, or one of the main characters, the fisherman in question throughout the book, many of those stories.
Absolutely.
Including the courtroom scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was trying the case. made me consider the fact that these people were voiceless. I was their voice. So I hadn't had to win the case, but I had to break the blacklist because this couldn't go on.
And this is something that was close to home because when you were a kid, something happened to you and your family, right?
Absolutely.
What was that?
My family was victimized by the blacklist. My father was injured when he was fishing, and he was out of work for a year, and there was no income. In fact, we survived because other fishermen brought fish at the end of trips over, which we had almost every night for dinner. It was a very strained, difficult time in the family. And I watched my father, my mother go through these awful strains. I was very young. I was only 3 or 4 years old, but I do remember it. I remember them, the tears and the agony and the fear, and how other fishermen who witnessed the incident would not testify because if they testified, they would be put on the blacklist. The insurance companies had a stranglehold on the industry. They controlled the boat owners controlled the fishermen, and everything was done according to their rules.
And you were 3 or 4 years old, but you remember this because it was so hard on your family.
Oh, I do, yes.
And at some point, you actually grew up on the docks.
I did. Worked the docks, worked the fishing boats, absolutely.
But something made you want to become a lawyer.
Yeah. It was an interesting turn of events. When I was in the 7th grade, I was at St. Anne's school being taught by nuns.
Getting beat up by nuns.
Well, they were tough.
I heard you had an attitude. Is that true?
They were tough, and I did have an attitude, and I deserved everything that happened. But I also had one lay teacher, Mr. Costigan, and a fascinating man. He was an engineer. He had worked in Boston for an engineering firm for decades. He was married, but his wife died, and they never had children. So he was alone, and he decided that he didn't want to do that anymore. And he came, lived in Gloucester, right around the corner from St. Anne's School, and started teaching social studies, history, and other subjects along those lines in 7th and 8th grade. And in a 7th grade class, when we were discussing an issue and we were debating, he said to me, "Mr. Orlando, you will be missing your calling if you don't become a lawyer."
So it's his fault.
That was the beginning. That was the first time it ever was broached. And I thought about it, a lawyer. I mean, the males in my family for generations have been fishermen. Most of them didn't even go to high school. They went fishing. I was expecting, I sort of didn't think about it, but it was sort of understood that I would become a fisherman.
I get how that goes.
Yeah.
Sort of understood what I would do for work too.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
We declared that in 1984, correct?
That's exactly right. And he did that. And then in high school, there was another incident which was kind of comical in retrospect. We took these achievement tests that kids all over the country take. And one day I'm in class, and over the loudspeaker, I was summoned to the office.
Shocking.
And I said to myself, what did I do now? I didn't even know that I had done anything because it wasn't the first time I had been summoned to the office.
Can't believe it.
Went down to the office and
Mild-mannered.
they were there. The headmaster, the dean of students, the guidance counselors, they were all there. And I walked in and I had no idea what this was about. And they said, well, we got the results of the achievement test. I said, okay. They said, you finished in the top 1% in the nation in abstract reasoning. I had no idea what that was. And I said, well, okay, that's nice. I said, I don't know what that is. And they said, and one of them got very excited. He said, it's the ability to reason in the abstract, which didn't exactly help me. I said, still don't know what it is. And he said, well, it would really be something that would help you when you play chess, because you can see 5 moves ahead and your opponent can't see what what you can see. Well, I grew up in a fishing community, downtown Gloucester. There wasn't a lot of chess being played in my house. So I said, okay. And then one of them said, it would be a great asset for a trial lawyer. So I heard it again. And that's when I thought, I guess that's what I'll do.
So all these bankrupted insurance companies have these teachers to thank.
Indeed.
Okay.
Indeed.
Okay.
And all these fishermen and their families who able to live with dignity and honor based on, are also there because of what we
Mr.
did.
Costigan and the administration at St. Anne.
They don't even know who they owe it to.
They don't even know. All right, so tell me. We know a little bit about your background. You went to New England School of Law, graduated in 1978, right?
Correct.
And then you went to, you passed the bar.
Yes.
And you went to work for a firm in Boston.
Yes.
Okay.
For 1 year.
You were an associate for 1 year, 1979.
Right.
And you were an associate handling maritime cases.
Yes.
Okay, so shortly after that, you broke off with one of your other junior associates there, Ed White.
Right.
And you guys started Orlando and White.
We did.
And Orlando and White is now Orlando and Associates PC.
Correct.
So here we are, 46 years at the turn of January in a few days. Will be 46 years, our 46th year. And it started then.
Orlando and White literally started on January 1st, 1980. I was at my desk on January 1st, 1980, with a handful of cases that my clients that I brought with me from my previous employer, the clients who wanted to stay with me, they came and I began working those.
Of course, those clients stayed with you because they came to you in the first place.
Correct.
I mean, these were people from Gloucester that were hurt on boats that knew you.
Exactly.
And you were one of them.
Exactly right.
So they came to you.
They knew I spoke their language in a way that a lot of lawyers who practiced law and who could be effective litigators, but really didn't understand the fishing industry, didn't understand the soul of a fisherman in the way that I could, because that was my whole life.
You also did it.
Yes, I did.
They saw you work on the docks.
Right.
Okay. So these guys came with you when you started the firm. You and Ed started with a handful of files, and you were able to get off and running.
Yeah.
And then and that was across the street here at the Blackburn building.
Yeah, top floor, fourth floor, top floor on Main Street, looking out to the square here.
St. Peter's Square.
Yeah, overlooking this building.
In St. Peter's Square, the patron saint of fishermen.
That's right.
Okay. And so this is in 1980. This is like right smack dab in the middle of the biggest part of this problem.
Yes. The Blacklist had been raging at that point for about 20 years, totally strangling the industry.
So tell us exactly tell us in your terms, what is the Blacklist? How would you explain it to someone who's never heard of this before?
The Blacklist was a effort by the insurance industry that insured the fishing vessels against claims being brought against them. So if a fisherman was injured in the course of his employment, then he could bring under the existing law, the law of unseaworthiness, the Jones Act negligence, could bring a claim against the vessel if the vessel owner or other crew member were negligent in the conduct of their work that caused the injury.
Or if the boat were unseaworthy.
Or if the vessel was unseaworthy.
Part of the boat was broken or not fit for its particular purposes,
Exactly.
right?
Not fit for its intended purpose. And that would be the case. But the insurance companies informed the vessel owners, if this fisherman brings a claim against the boat, we'll defend it, but he's never going to fish again. And they let every other boat owner know it. This individual would not fish. So you bring a claim, and the other men on the vessel who may have witnessed the negligence, who may be aware of the unseaworthy condition, were told they better never testify for him, because if they did, they would be blacklisted. And
they couldn't afford that. They all had to feed their kids.
It was impossible.
I mean, we wouldn't want someone watching this episode to think, oh, these guys were cowards. No, these guys had to feed their kids. They had no transferable skills. They had nothing they could do.
Absolutely.
They were totally overpowered by these insurance companies.
Most of them felt awful. I mentioned it earlier. In my family, when my father was injured, these men were, at the end of every voyage, would bring a bucket of fresh fish for us to eat so we'd have food on the table. They did what they could. But what they could not do, even if they wanted to, and most of them were honorable, decent men who would have gladly come forward and told the truth. But they couldn't, because if they did, they would be out of work. And it wasn't as if they had transferable skills, because they didn't.
A lot of them were uneducated. Most of them were uneducated.
Most of them didn't even speak English.
Because they came here from Sicily or Portugal or...
Exactly right.
Any other number of places, right?
That's right.
Okay. Now, I can say that you were mentioning earlier people who might be really good trial attorneys, but they didn't grow up on the docks. How it's different. How these guys trusted you because they knew you were one of them.
They knew I was one of them. They knew I understood the industry. It was amazing how many people who held themselves out as lawyers who could handle a maritime case could not even describe the configuration of the fish hold or the galley or whatever.
And I can tell you that just growing up in your house, coming up in this firm, all the extra work I had to do to become aware and knowledgeable about those things. Because like you said, if you don't grow up doing it, if you don't do it yourself, hands-on, it's difficult to really understand.
It is indeed. It's one of the most dangerous occupations in the world. Think about being in the North Atlantic in February. It's freezing cold, the wind is cutting, the boat's being tossed about on a rough ocean. You have to find your footing, work with the nets, work with the fish. The chances of injury are so high. And there are so many serious injuries. Plus, you've got all the gear. You've got lines being pulled out of the ocean. You've got winches turning, grease splattering around the decks. The danger, it's almost an impossibility that there won't be injuries.
And not the least of which are the concerns that there's no hospital anywhere nearby. There's no ambulances.
No, so many times
The Coast Guard doesn't even leave the station until someone's in the water. It's absurd.
Yeah, many times on truly serious injuries, men had to be airlifted by the Coast Guard off of vessels. And I describe that situation in my novel, The Fisherman's Son, of a fisherman who had to be airlifted off the boat. The main character in the novel had to be airlifted off the boat because of his injuries, and the effect it had on his ability to function and breathe. It was an extremely dangerous occupation, and one that these men, however, they loved it. It was in their blood.
It was their lifestyle.
Fishing was what they did.
And a lot of them still feel that way. I mean, the community might have changed a bit. We don't have the fleet we once had. A lot of it's down in New Bedford now, not so much up here in Gloucester. But a lot of them still feel that way.
Oh, I think for most of the fishermen who grew up on boats, who grew up, at 13, 14, and 15, they were deckhands on boats. They were learning the craft, and it was a craft to be learned. There was so much to do. Mending nets. A net ripped, it had to be repaired. You had to know how to mend a net. Very, very important. Otherwise, the fish would literally swim through the net. Can't have that.
Now, you had trials. You had to explain this stuff to juries.
Absolutely.
Juries, just like any other person watching this podcast or just a lay person not generally understanding, someone from the middle of the state, how did you explain to them the operation? I mean, this day and age, I'm able to put up a video on a screen in the courtroom. I can play it right in front of their monitors. Every juror has a screen in front of them. I can show them the operation. I can show them what a haulback is. How did you explain to him what it was in the 80s?
I had models made. Models that were 5 or 6 feet long.
Fishing boat models.
Fishing boat models.
We still have them in the office somewhere.
Yeah, we still do. Yeah. There's one right over there. And Eastern rig draggers, Western rig draggers, scallopers, the different types of fishing, and I had a model for each of them. And while they weren't necessarily the exact vessel in question in a given case, an Eastern rig dragger has so many similarities with others. I could use the model to explain. I remember the insurance company lawyers used to object like crazy, my using it.
Shocking. Insurance company don't want the jurors to know how this actually works. Huh?
Exactly. They would fight. Most of the judges understood it was a chalk. It was not meant to say this was the boat, but this is the operation in which it happened. This is how it happened.
And just for those listening, a chalk, and I can explain this. A chalk is just, think about having a chalkboard and drawing a picture of something for a juror rather than telling them about it. The same can be going for showing them an object or a poster or any other number of examples, visual aid examples. And generally anything can be used as a chalk, right? They always say a smelly shoe can be used as a chalk.
Absolutely. And I used to stretch the nets out over the side and show how the net would be dragged through the ocean, capturing the fish, and then they would haul it back, what we called a haul back, bring the net back up. The winches would pull it. Now, at that point, the nets would weigh thousands of pounds. Plus, you had the resistance of the ocean, so you needed powerful winches to pull, and wires and cables to pull the net back on board. And during that, the boat was being tossed around. The ocean was being played. The boat couldn't move very much during haulback because you couldn't move. The boat was stuck. So that means it was totally at the mercy of the ocean at that moment. Highly dangerous occupation, very risky, and a lot of men were hurt.
And this is not just in the beautiful summer months. The seasons did not, you were also out there in the dead of winter.
Oh, it was brutal, yeah. A lot of times, the North Atlantic would be so rough, so cold. I mean, literally, one of the things the vessels had to do, the fishermen had to do, is break the ice that had formed on the masts and on the equipment, because literally the vessel could get top heavy and flip over. Think about a mast that was 30 feet from the deck up, covered with a foot of ice.
And the outriggers.
Thousands of pounds. Yep. And they used to have to go up.
Imagine the doors and
the hammers incredibly heavy, incredibly dangerous. They did it, and they brought beautiful fresh fish back to be sold so when people say how much they love haddock, there's a price to be paid by the men who catch that haddock.
A serious price. Yes. I handled a case for a young man from Gloucester who was lost at sea in 2022, I believe it was. No, it was 2021 in November. And one of the issues was, well, how do we prove how long he lived while he was in the water in the North Atlantic in November? And Judge Toro, who you came up with in the federal court in Boston, there was a case from 1985 where he described what 10 minutes in the icy waters of the North Atlantic would be in the winter. And he described it as the opposite of hell as far as the temperature, but for an eternity. And it was a great, he clearly understood the industry, Judge Toro.
I tried a lot of cases in front of Judge Toro. He was a brilliant jurist. He was a brilliant jurist who really understood the industry. And he used to take out the golden oar. The golden oar for maritime law. That's right. He used to take out the golden oar and display it in his courtroom when we tried cases.
Because the Admiralty Court used to be separate from the federal court.
Correct. Until 1972 when they
consolidated them. So now the Admiralty Court is the federal court, but it wasn't that way before.
That's correct.
Right. So when you were trying cases in the 80s, though, it was in the federal court.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
However, the judges all had grown up, had practiced, so they really had a handle on the Admiralty law. Some of the newer judges that came in the 80s, not so much.
And now it's still not as great.
Many of them simply don't understand the industry, do not understand the law.
Nor could they, really. How could they?
Well, they could have listened to me and I would have told them.
Well, every courtroom I walk into, they remind me of that, Dad. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Do me a favor then. Explain for anyone listening, how did the insurance companies really enforce this blacklist for so long? Like, how did it go so unchecked for so long? You've explained a little bit about how they would not give someone a job if they testified. They would take the job away. Or they would not insure the boat if somebody was on the boat that had brought a claim for personal injuries. What else, if anything, did they do to enforce the blacklist?
Well, you have to, if a fisherman was injured, came ashore, was being treated, he would be covered by the doctrine of maintenance and cure. The cure being covering the medical expenses. The insurance company would get those medical records because they were paying the bills. And by having the medical records, okay, they had an eye on what was going on. If the injury was not something that a man could recover from in a week or two, a month, and go back to work, they'd make it very clear to the captain, you inform that fisherman that if he wants to continue to fish, he is not to meet with an attorney, he is not to consult with an attorney, bring a claim, because if he does, he will not be allowed to go back fishing on any vessel that's insured in New England, which effectively told them, but a lot of the men would say, hey, I'm hurt, I'm bringing a claim, and they would go to a lawyer, and what would end up happening is the lawyer would try to would take depositions of other crewmen, and the other crewmen would testify as dictated to by the insurance company.
Because they were scared.
They were told, this is what you will say. You will say this, but it's not true. That's not what happened. You will say this or you will be blacklisted. And it was extraordinarily effective for the insurance company.
And not only that, the insurance companies talked to each other.
Oh, it was an industry standard right across. There weren't honestly that many insurance companies that handled maritime claims because they were different than other types of claims. They were different. The boats paid very high premiums. It could be very profitable if there weren't a lot of claims. And they knew how to keep claims down. They could raise the premiums. The boat owner had to pay it because he couldn't go fishing without insurance. The banks wouldn't let them. So they paid the high premiums, claims weren't brought, and the insurance companies just piled up the money.
What about talks amongst fishermen? Did these guys talk to each other? Like, dude, don't say anything because
everybody understood the nature of the industry. And a lot of families, there were brothers and cousins and uncles and grandparents who fished together, and they wouldn't testify for the injured fishermen because they were supporting the family of the injured fisherman. They couldn't lose their job too. It was a very, very difficult time for a long time until.
Yes, so let's get to the until. Because at some point, you and a few other attorneys found the courageous enough people to break this. How did that happen? Take us through that.
Well, it was more than it was honestly, I began to realize that it wasn't about courage. These men were as courageous as any men you'll ever meet. It had to be the right circumstance. And I describe it, as I've said, in The Fisherman's Son, the case here that I tried. In the case, the men who fished on the vessel would not testify for the injured fishermen.
And it wasn't just because of the blacklist or because losing the job. They were also getting bullied, right?
Oh,
you describe in The Fisherman's Son a scene where some insurance company thugs go and beat a fisherman up because he was planning to testify.
Correct. And
that really happened.
That everything happened. They knew, the insurance company understood that if the blacklist was broken, if other fishermen came forward, then it would destroy the blacklist. And by the way, they might go to prison for obstruction of justice. It was no joke. What they were doing was criminal.
And they knew it.
And of course they knew it. They had their lawyers. They knew it. And which is the story I tell in The Fisherman's Son of what happened in that trial.
The story of Busty Barna in the book.
Exactly. What happened to Busty Barna and what happened to the lawyers in the insurance company that worked to force the blacklist in the effect of it on this man and his family. It was a very difficult time. It wasn't just me. There were other lawyers. But one of the things I understood was I needed to find the right case where I didn't have to use fishermen as witnesses.
Because they wouldn't testify.
Because I had to find a case where I could try to circumvent that. Couldn't do it completely. I still tried to use fishermen as witnesses. And they just wouldn't, they would not risk their careers and their families to testify.
So how'd you do it?
Well, in this case, one fisherman who, the main character in the Fisherman's Son is an attorney named John Palermo. And John Palermo grew up in the fishing industry, like I did. He grew up in the fishing on boats. His father was a fisherman. He grew up on boats, and he became a lawyer. And at first, he didn't really intend to represent fishermen, but Busty Bonner walked into his office one day and needed help. And he knew the guy. So he took the case, and he began to comprehend the difficulties. But one of the men who was a crew member on the vessel, a character in the book named Peter Novello, was prepared to testify. And one day while he was working on a different type, he was still blacklisted from any of the draggers. He did get a job on a longliner, which is a different type of fishing. It didn't make any difference. They were still insured too. They were going to get him too. But he just defied him, and the captain of the vessel said, I'm not going to blacklist him. I'm not going to do it. So one night when Peter Novello was going down to check the boat to make sure it wasn't taking on water, he was jumped by two thugs and beaten almost to death. The message was clear. It was right before the trial, right before when he was going to testify. But there were witnesses. There were witnesses to the assault who saw the men who did it as they ran away, got in their cars. They were older fishermen who couldn't fish anymore, retired fishermen, men in their 70s and 80s, who would work on the vessels, who would not work on the vessels, but they would sleep on the vessels to prevent anyone from breaking into the pilot house, stealing the equipment or the all-important charts.
This wasn't an era where there was cameras everywhere. This is an era where there was a lot of theft and things like that.
Exactly. You had to protect your property, and they would hire these elderly fishermen to stay on the boat. And these fishermen saw. So once they saw and the authorities got the names and it went up the line to the feds, we had obstruction of justice. A witness in a federal trial was assaulted to prevent him from testifying.
Witnesses in federal trials still get threatened in different ways. It happened in one of my cases. I'll tell you in a second. Go ahead.
It happens, and they testified, and it began to unravel the whole scheme, at least in this case. And it really was significant because this was a case that was well known in the community, because Busty Bonner was a young man with a young wife and two little babies, and everybody felt a great deal of compassion for him. And basically what happened was, when the men were arrested for the assault, they gave up their bosses. Their bosses, who hired them? The defense attorney. Who ordered the defense attorney to hire them? The insurance company. So they were prosecuted by the U.S. attorney in Boston. And which, once they did it, everybody started giving up everybody else. The attorney said, I did that, but I was ordered to, and the entire blacklist came out. And you have to understand, federal judges didn't know about the blacklist.
It's almost shocking. Almost like they didn't want to know.
Almost like they didn't want to know. When it was brought to them, you needed people to testify. People weren't going to testify about the blacklist. They weren't going to give up their career to talk about a practice that they had no control over. So they were afraid, so they didn't. And this went on for decades until we broke it.
And it wasn't just your case. There was other cases around the
There
country.
there were others like it. My case was right in the middle of it, and I was lucky. I ended up with a judge who was as difficult as could be, and who literally was sympathetic to the insurance companies and the defense attorneys. But I was able to push him till he went too far, and the chief judge of the federal court landed on him, and it was a process. It took a long time. It was a long battle, but a battle that we ultimately won and freed every fisherman: Gloucester, Boston, New Bedford, down in Rhode Island, everywhere up in Maine, Portland.
You think they'd have learned their lesson, but apparently the ones who went through learning that lesson in the 80s, they must not be around anymore, because they're still doing stuff like this.
Well, some of them went to jail. And
I hope so.
Some of them went to jail, but yeah, of course not. I mean, people are going to do what they can do anytime they can do it. If they can bully somebody, they're going to do it.
You'd think sunlight being the best disinfectant and shining a sunlight on this horrible practice would have ended it. But of course, here we are in the 2020s, and I have a maritime case where an insurance company representative went to the employer of my expert witness to intimidate him by saying if he testified on our behalf that he would lose his job, his day job.
Yep.
Okay. Insurance company representative tells his boss, because they don't like the case, that if he testifies on behalf of the deceased's family, the deceased fisherman who died at sea, that he'd lose his job. And that happened in 2022.
And don't forget the politicians that were involved in it as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's disgusting.
I mean, corruption.
Insurance companies are the most corrupt organizations on the planet still.
They have lots of money to pay people.
And they do. And they do. It didn't stop with the blacklist. That was obviously the biggest, most shining example of how corrupt they are. And it was broken, but it didn't stop. Now they have all sorts of other little ways to do it.
I will say it did stop for a while. There was about a 5 or 6 year period while they were fighting their own prison sentences and dealing with.
They had to make good.
They were, but bad practices are never going to stop.
So after you guys were able to break this blacklist, you were having a huge amount of success in the 80s.
Yes.
In fact, the New York Times wrote an article about you.
They wrote an article about...
A few articles about you.
Yeah.
But one in particular, you were concerned painted a pretty significant target on your back.
Yeah, well, they called me attorney. They would describe me as attorney for the injured. And they told a story about my cases and what I did and so forth.
And specifically how you were undefeated at the time.
Well, that story, that they did write that. But that story originally started in Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly, which every trial lawyer in the Commonwealth reads.
Still.
And
it's a good publication.
They called me one day and said, we understand for the last 14 years you've tried hundreds of cases in the federal court and won every one of them. I said, well, that's true. He said, we want to do a story. I said, no, thanks. Don't do the story, please. I said, because you'll be painting a target on my back and it'll hurt my clients. And it would be unfair to them. They did the story anyway.
Of course, the insurance companies didn't need the story because you had bankrupted at least one of them.
Yes, exactly.
And they were so afraid of you and this firm.
Well, they tried to hire me.
I was going to ask, they flew you to New York at one point.
Yeah, they flew me to New York. They tried to hire me to represent the insurance companies. And they were very generous with their offer. They asked me, could you come to New York for a meeting? We want to talk to you about the possibility of working with you. And I thought about it. I said, yeah, okay, I'll come. So I packed my briefcase with about 6 or 7 files, and I took them down to New York that I had, claims I had with that insurance company involved. And they said, we don't want to talk. I said, we can't talk about anything until we get these cases resolved.
Because it would have been a conflict of interest.
In theory, yeah. It would have been conflict. So I said, I won't, if I can't settle these cases, so we settled all of them. We signed papers on the spot, boom, boom. We did very well on every case. They agreed. They wanted to keep me happy. We went out to this great and very fancy steakhouse.
What was it called?
Oh, I can't remember, but it was a great place. It was a place that I would never go.
So you're in this New York City. So they fly you to New York City. You brought mom.
No.
You didn't bring mom? Okay. So they fly you to New York. You bring your 6 or 7 files.
Settle the cases, put everything in my briefcase.
You're eating a fancy steak. You're probably drinking nice wine.
Yep, sitting in the restaurant. It was very nice. We had
How many execs were there?
the table was full. There was about 5 or 6 of them, I guess. And I said, so what is it you want to talk to me about? And they said, we'd like you to be chief counsel for all New England maritime cases. You'll defend them all. And if it works out as well as we think it will, we'll give you the entire East Coast. I said, okay. And we'll pay you, which at the time was a great deal of money. And all I could think about was my grandfather and my father and what my family went through. And I thought, the day could never come that I would represent an insurance company against my people, because that's what it would have been. I would have been defending cases against my people, and I couldn't do that. No way I was going to do it. I told them I can't do it. They said, but you came to talk to us. I said, you wanted to talk? We talked. But you don't have enough money to get me to turn on my people. I just can't, won't do it.
That's a great story. It's a great story. I mean, I'll make sure when they call me to fly to New York City to meet with whoever it was, some international insurance company that I get the best steak available.
Oh, it was good. The steak was good.
The steak was good.
It was particularly flavorful because the insurance company was paying for it.
Yeah, you should have played it out and had a few steaks. Like, listen, I'll think about it for 24 hours and then come back for another meal.
No, I was home that night for dinner. I mean, I flew down in the morning, settled the cases in the morning, went to the restaurant for lunch, got in a cab, went to the airport, flew home, was home for dinner.
It's amazing. All right. Let's talk about some modern parallels.
Okay.
All right. Now, I see small versions of this all the time. The insurance companies now, and I actually think it's antitrust, and something should probably be done about it. But the insurance companies keep this file that they share among the insurers about plaintiffs who bring claims. I think they call it the ISO. So anytime someone brings a claim, they go check their list, and they know if this plaintiff has brought a personal injury claim before this one. And I'm seeing it come up in depositions and in courtrooms even, that they are trying to create this narrative to the jury or to the judge or whoever's there that these are serial plaintiffs and that all their cases are frivolous and they're just trying to make another payday and all these other things. This is just mini versions of the same operation. Those insurance companies with the Blacklist, they were sharing that same information amongst each other.
Right.
And they were doing it to preclude claims altogether. Now they're just doing it to discredit claims, and they think that they're somehow right. They think that's okay.
Well, one of the problems is the courts themselves do not do enough to protect the litigants.
Nothing.
Okay, they don't do enough to protect the litigants. You know, it's amazing. The one thing that I was always very conscious of was I was representing a lot of people who were marginally educated, who might be able to speak some English, but mostly English was a second language at best for them. The entire trappings of the courtroom intimidated them. They were up against a multi-billion-dollar insurance company who had lawyers and adjusters and all kinds of people, investigators, who were working on the case.
Experts.
And my client had me. And I had to battle for that client, okay? And to too many judges, and remember where judges come from, okay? Judges don't generally come from the plaintiff's personal injury bar. They generally come from big corporate situations, insurance companies that have staffs of lawyers.
The U.S. Attorney's Office. And places where they represent either the government or they represent insurance companies or some other big organization.
And they have a built-in prejudice against individuals. They just do. They just do. And some of them, too many of them, think that black robe makes them gods.
Yeah, see, this This is not the first time I've heard you say this, and just so you know, I think you'll take this as a badge of honor, of pride. But this type of language early in my career got me in a little bit of trouble with the appeals court. I remember I put in an appeal brief, and we were appealing a case on a few different grounds, but one of them was that the judge should have recused himself. And I said something to the nature of, judges are just people that wear black robes. They are still people. They still have biases. They still have prejudices. They still have a whole life behind them when they get to the bench of life experience. That doesn't go away because you don the black robe. And the appeals court panel ate my lunch. As I was getting beat up by the appeals court panel, I was thinking to myself, I think my father would be so proud of me right now for taking this position. But here I was getting beat up. But you were saying, I mean, they don't come from the plaintiff's bar.
No, they don't. So for
the plaintiff's bar tends to be people who are out there to protect people.
That's right.
And they don't want to go.
And they're small firms. Like my firm had 5 or 6 lawyers at most. Small firms, if I were to leave and become a judge, the firm would fall apart. The reality was federal judges, even state court judges, do not come from this environment. They come from the environment. They're U.S. attorneys or they're district attorneys, and they become judges, and they have a built-in prejudice.
They also get appointed by the president.
And by governors.
So, by
paying, by donating.
In the federal court, they get appointed by the president.
Yeah, and by donating. Well,
so someone has to donate a lot of money to get on the president's radar.
If you need a judge in Rhode Island, the president goes to the senior member of his party, usually a United States senator or a congressman, from there. And it's someone, and they'll say, well, how about Jim Jones? He's a good guy for this. Well, Jim Jones just happened to be someone who donated to that politician over many years, and the politician's in debt to him and is paying him back by having the president appoint him to a federal judge. And there's no way an indigent fisherman is going to get a fair shake in that courtroom. It just doesn't happen.
It's actually been a major problem for the fishing industry generally for the last 50 years.
Yes, it is.
Since the Magnuson-Stevens Act, Sustainable Fisheries Act, they just don't have a lobby. The lobby's not strong enough.
It just doesn't.
Can't compete with the environmentalists or anybody else who donates a lot of money to politicians.
You know, just think about somebody or a law firm that donates every year to a given politician. That politician becomes a member of Congress or a United States senator. Well, that senator wants to pay back. And the way they can pay back is they'll say, do you have someone who wants to be a federal judge? Yeah, Jim Jones wants to be a federal judge. Yeah.
Somebody's daughter or son wants to be a federal judge.
And they were on their way. And the truth of the matter is, federal judges, for the most part, are very bright, very significant.
Very well educated.
Very talented individuals. Many state court judges are really not that in that position. Many of them should never have been appointed, but they're there, and they're there for life.
Well, I mean, I think that the system is so flawed, it's unbelievable. I mean, the system itself, just the appointment process, you could have a career prosecutor. On paper, that prosecutor is eminently qualified to be a trial judge because they tried cases in that court for decades, except they've never handled a civil case. And yet they're in the Superior Court in Massachusetts and they're sitting on civil and criminal cases.
Absolutely.
That is a huge flaw in the system. I mean, I've handled medical malpractice trials, car accident trials, where I'm in a position of having to, write briefs throughout the trial to explain the basic procedural or evidentiary rules that we need to apply here. And it's not even the judge's fault. The judge has never done it. The system is flawed.
The first female to be appointed to the federal judgeship in Boston was Raya Zobel.
She was there till not that long ago.
I think she recently, not too long ago.
She's on retired status now, I think.
But she, very bright woman, very talented, no ego. She really tried to do the job well. In my opinion, she was one of the better judges. But when she was first appointed, I was practicing. And the first maritime case that was before her was my case, was the case I was handling. And she had no idea about maritime law and procedure, etc.
But her husband did.
However, her husband,
Wrote the book.
Hilla Zobel, wrote the book on maritime law. So we're trying the case in front of Raya Zobel, and Hilla Zobel, who's a judge, wrote
He was a
the
state
book.
court judge, though,
Yes,
right?
he was a state court judge. But he wrote the book, and she would go home at night, and she would go home
We're
at
presuming
night
this, of course.
without doubt, there's no doubt in my mind, because the next day she knew more about the issue than she did the day before. She learned it somewhere.
Well, she could have done research, including talking to her husband.
Yeah, and he was really an extraordinarily knowledgeable judge, and
And you thought highly of her as well.
I did. I think that she was a great judge. She was fair. She was balanced. And it's not true of all of them, but in the federal court, Mazzoni, Toro, so many of the judges were really great judges, fair, balanced. Unfortunately, there were others.
You wrote about one of them, I think.
I did.
In The Fisherman's Son.
I did.
Is the judge
Fictional.
Fictional, of course.
Fictional.
Of course.
But I had Judge Mazzoni wrote me a note. He actually vacationed in Rockport, went to a bookstore in Rockport, saw The Fisherman's Son, saw my picture, picked it up, read it, wrote me a note, great note, that said, I read the book. It's well written, really very good. You say it's fiction, but we know better.
Well, they all know better, and I can tell you from personal experience that when I walk into the courthouse and Judge Saris or Judge O'Toole or Judge Sorokin or any of the number of judges that you handled cases in front of, and I forget who exactly it was, one of them made a comment to me, Mr. Orlando, if I rule against you here, is there going to be a novel written about it? And
Now a podcast.
I guess not a novel, Your Honor, but a podcast. Here we are talking about it. But, it's an interesting career we have. It's an interesting career. What would you say the most modern parallel to the Blacklist would be, in your experience?
Well, corrupt practices are never going to stop. Corrupt practices happen all the time. You could see it. You could see with witnesses being intimidated in federal criminal trials. You see it a lot. State criminal trials. Some people believe, and I myself never handled criminal law, but some saw some parallels in the Karen Reed case.
There was plenty of corruption in the Karen Reed case.
Well,
That was government corruption, though.
There was,
in theory.
corruption's corruption. And at the end there was a lot. Now, I can't testify to that, but it was a group of police officers on one side, and were they telling the truth? I don't know the answer. But
The jury spoke.
But many people suggested that they weren't believable.
Well, the jury spoke twice.
Exactly.
The jury
Hung jury.
The jury hung the first time and not guilty the second time. The jury spoke twice. I'm actually not a criminal lawyer either, obviously, but the fact that they retried that case is shocking to me, considering how bad it went the first time.
It was surprising to me that they didn't let it go away. But again, the government is a powerful tool. When the government's against you, you are really hung out to dry. Look at all these. Look at how many people who are crimes of allegations, and they're charged with crimes, and they don't have any real money to hire fancy lawyers. They have to take a public defender. And let's face it, people aren't public defenders because they're in demand. Okay? They don't. At least they have a lawyer, and that's the best the system might be able to do for them. But it's not a level playing field.
Well, Karen Reed's attorneys, as I understand it, were not paid handsomely for their defense, their vigorous defense.
And the reason was that they wanted the publicity that went with representing Karen.
They got it.
And that's the same thing happened with O.J. Simpson and others.
Well, OJ had the assets. He could pay the best lawyers in the country, and he did. I mean,
I'm not so sure
I'm not so
sure he paid.
F. Lee Bailey and Dershowitz and Johnny Cochran.
He had so many attorneys that if he had paid them their rates, he would have ended up in the millions of dollars. And OJ was not what you would have called a disciplined person who saved his money.
Maybe not, but he certainly had some more money than Karen Reed would have had.
What he had
He
was
had access.
What he had was a name,
Right.
and
That was the
the name representing him, getting him off, would make their careers, and it did.
Well, there's definitely corruption all over the system. It's not just in the criminal side, it's also in the civil side, as we talked about with the Blacklist today.
Absolutely.
All right, Dad, thank you for doing this. The first episode of Behind the Bar. You should feel very honored and special that you got to be part of it.
Well, I enjoyed it, and anytime you want to talk about cases or the practice of law, I'm always ready. Did it for a long time.
We are going to put links to the Gloucester trilogy, all three of your fisherman novels, Fisherman's Son, The Bastard's Weapon, and One Man's Hero.
Yes.
And we'll put an Amazon link right in the subject here, so people who are interested can get a hands on their copy of the book. If you decide to buy The Fisherman's Son or The Bastard's Weapon or One Man's Hero or all three, and you reach out and let us know, we might even get the author to sign it for you. What do you think, Dad?
I think we could be honest that.
If you've seen stories like this in your life, if you're an attorney and you've handled a case of immense corruption, if you're an individual who's suffered at the hands of an insurance company or the government, let us know. We'd love to talk to you. If you want to learn more about this type of stuff, if you want to hear more stories from attorneys who practice in our court system, if you want to make sure this type of insurance company corruption or government corruption doesn't continue, doesn't affect you and your family, subscribe to Behind the Bar. We're going to be doing stories like this on a routine basis. You're going to learn all about what happens on the inside, what the actual behind the scenes looks like handling these cases. It doesn't have to get national attention to be corrupt. We're going to expose it here. We're going to talk about it here, what we see every day in the court system, and we're going to have guests on that do the same. So like, share, comment, subscribe. Let's together expose the bad guys so the good guys can prevail.